Hey folks, welcome to another online meetup. I'm just gonna wait just a few seconds here and let other folks join. Hey folks, welcome to another online meetup. I'm just gonna. All right, cool. I see more people are joining, so welcome. Welcome. If you want to say hi in the chat, please go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna say hello. If you want to tell me where you're joining from, that would be also awesome. I always like to know where folks are joining from. I'm joining today from San Francisco Bay Area. Hello, hello. Well, very good. Let's get started then. Let's get started. So the plan for today, I see more people are joining, so very nice. Very cool. All right, so the plan for today, this is the hello and welcome part. Then we're gonna build, actually I'm gonna build two flows for you. And then in the end, we can spend, if there are any time left, we can do some questions. But let me, so yeah, the hello and welcome part. So my name is Max Katz, and I'm with Okta, and I lead the community for workflows. This event is being recorded, and then you can watch. What's really nice about Crowdcast is that you can watch a replay right after the event ends. So right at the same page, but I will also upload the video to YouTube. So you can also watch it there. And then tomorrow I'm going to send a message with resources and also a link to the video. So that's the intro. And again, we're going to spend the rest of the time actually building two flows. So let's do that. Now the flows that we're going to build two flows. So the first flow is going to be, this is what's called a joiner sort of example, is that when a person joins the company, right, there are a lot of things that need to happen, giving them access to your applications, to giving them, the various subscriptions, access to various groups, and so on. So this is the flow we're going to build. So when the user is activated, right, in our example, we're going to send a message in Slack notifying someone, hey, this user was just activated. And then we're also going to send an email, and then we're also going to save that information into a table, right? And the second flow is the leaver part. So we got the joiner. There's also the mover when someone moves within the organization. But we're not going to do that today. And for the leaver part is that when someone leaves, right? So again, a lot of things need to happen. I see there's one question. The sound became very echo for me. Oh, so sometimes, sometimes it could happen if you might have two tabs open. I know it happened to me too sometimes. So check if Crowdcast is open in two tabs, that could cause kind of sound issues. Another option always is to just refresh the page, and you're just going to come back to the same place in Crowdcast. So that's another option. But so again, when the user is deactivated, again, a lot of things need to happen. But just for the purpose of an example, we're actually going to call a third-party API just to show you how it works. All right. And so as this is a no slides event, let's actually jump into workflows. Okay. So let me see here. I'm just going to wait for the page. Okay. Update. Okay, here we go. So quickly, I'm going to go back to the home page. All right. So when you start with workflows, this is where you're going to see. So there are some videos on to help you get started. There are also some templates here that you can use, and these are kind of out of the box pre-built flows that you can play with. You can add them, and you can see how they run, and so on. So very, very good way to start. But let's go to flows. And so on this side, I've got all my various folders. As you can see, I'm using emojis for various folders just to help me sometimes find the folder I'm looking for. So I'm in this folder called First Flow September 28th. And so this is where we're going to build our first flow. Now, to build a flow, we just click New Flow, and we're going to give this a name. So user activated. And now we're going to check this button. Now, this button, what it does is that it allows us to see the flow history. So when we run the flow, we can see the execution and how data is passed from step to step. So it's always highly recommended to enable this, but you can also enable this later. So it doesn't, if you missed this or forgot, that's fine. You can always go back to user activated and then, click on the name and check this button. Okay, so we got a blank flow. Now, so usually there are two main ways how to trigger a flow. Okay, so number one, if an event occurs in your system, so that's what we're going to be using. For example, user activated or user deactivated, or there are a lot of other events. For example, password changed or user profile updated. There is a long list of events. So it's number one is an event triggers a flow. The other popular option is schedule. So you can schedule the flow to run periodically, whether it's every hour, every day, and every week. There are other ways, but these are the two most popular ones. So let's click Add Event. And so the event that we're going to be using, user activated, is coming from Okta. And then we can search activated. And then the event is added, so a card. So this is called a card. And again, this flow will be triggered when the user is activated in your Okta organization. And this is all the data that we get from an event. Now, so we're interested, in this particular case, we want to know about the user who was activated. And so this is the information that you get from this event. Now, sometimes this can be sufficient, but sometimes you want to get more information about the user. So to do that, we can add the next card called Read User, where we can get additional information about the user. And so what this works is we got, user activated event is fired. And then what do we do next? You can see it says, then do this. So we're going to add an app action. So app actions, these are connections to other services. And you can see some of the services that are listed here. So you can connect to these services and then call an action, or it's really calling an API from this service. So let's do Okta. And then we can search again. And the one we want is Read User. Now, it's asking me, like, do you want to sort of output all these properties? And actually, I don't need all these properties, so I'm going to just uncheck them. But I do want to check. I want to check username. I want to check primary email and just title. Right? But again, every card, well, most cards will allow you to configure these fields. Right? So you click Save. And the way, if you need to change what the input or the output, you open this gear, click on this gear, and then choose Fields. Okay, so just so you know how to do that. Okay, now, so this particular card needs an ID or login to work. And again, I mean, behind the scenes, there is an API call to Okta API. But using this card, it's a just sort of much higher abstraction level, right? It's, the API calling is done behind the scenes, so you don't need to worry about setting the API call and so on. But it does need an ID, and we have the ID coming from the event. So how do you pass data from card to card is you take the ID and just connect it like this. Okay. So now, next is, it's always also recommended to test the card. You can test, we're going to, of course, run the entire flow, but you can also test the card individually, which, again, highly recommended as you're building the flow. Now, most cards will have a play icon here, and it says test this card. So we can test this card before running it as part of the flow. And of course, it's going to ask us for an ID. So to get the ID, I'm going to go to my Okta dashboard. Let me just refresh the page here. Now, if you click on any user, and I'm going to click on this user. Now, in the URL has the ID. So you can just copy the ID and take it back to Workflows, paste the ID, and click test. And then we see the information about this user. All right. So this is how you would test this card and many other cards. So now we know that it works. Okay. So the event is triggered. We read more information. Now I want to create a message. So notice before I used app action. So again, these are connections to other services. I'm going to use a function. So functions allow you to manipulate data. So you can work with lists, objects. You can do math. You can do if then. You can do work with date and time and many other things. So I guess that's the difference. The app action, these are connections to other services, and functions are a way for you to manipulate data. So again, strings, numbers, if then, and so on. So we want is compose. This is a card that allows to create text, or create a message. So I'm going to type user, and now as before, I want to say the username. So I'm going to take, let's say the username here, and just drag and drop it into the card. Okay. Now I'm going to open the parenthesis. Let's say I want to get the title of the user. Then I'm going to close the parenthesis, and we can even put a little emoji. All right. So that's how you create a message, and of course you can make it as sort of sophisticated as you want. And so that's the message. And then the next step is we want to send a message to Slack. Okay. So again, Slack being an external service, we're going to click App Action, and we're going to search for Slack. And then these are all the actions that the card exposes for Slack, right? So you can see a lot of different actions. Again, behind the scenes, these are API calls. But the one we want is send message to channel. And again, you're presented, again, every card is going to be different, but you're presented with options to configure this card. And then you need to select the channel. And then do you want to send it as a bot? We're going to say yes. And the rest is fine. And we're going to click save. Now, again, you can decide which fields to show. Everything is fine, except we don't need the timestamp in this case. And we're going to click save. So again, this particular card, the way we configured it, it needs a text and then the name, the bot name. Actually, I forgot. So one more field I wanted is I'm going to go back and choose fields, and I'm going to use emoji. I'm going to enable the emoji as well. All right. Okay. So what I'm going to take this message that we created, and I'm going to send it connected to Slack. Okay. Now, one more thing that I recommend is, again, as you're building, of course, sort of more sophisticated flows, is that notice that the name of this variable is output. And I think this is fine for many cases, but sometimes you want to give it more context. So you can rename this. So if you click this little arrow and you can do customize, you can change the name. So for example, Slack message. And then you click save. And then the message is updated here, the name of the variable, and also here as well. So again, I recommend this because I think it just gives more context if you're building bigger flows. All right, name going to be user bot, and then emoji we're going to use unicorn. Now, as before, this is a good card to test individually or separately. So I'm going to click the test this card, and then the message, hey, is this working? And then click test. Now close. I'm going to go to Slack, and right here the message was sent. All right, so it's working. Okay, back to workflows. We're actually ready to test this. Let's save. So again, the flow is triggered. We're reading more information about the user. We're creating a message and then sending it to Slack. Now, next step is to enable the flow. And it takes 30 seconds, sometimes maybe 60 seconds for the flow to be sort of enabled on the back end. I'm going to go ahead and run it, but it's possible that it's not going to be triggered. So we'll run it again, and usually that's enough time for the flow to register. But again, turning the flow on. Now I'm going to go to flow history. That's why I enabled that option, if you remember at the beginning, so I can see the history, right? If you run the flow multiple times, you can see the data in each run. Let's go to my person here. And so Alicia here, and she is not active. And I'm going to click activate. All right. So no message in Slack yet. And again, I think it's possible that we just need to. Oh, actually, here we go. It worked. So this is the run that we just triggered, right? And we can see user activated. We can see all this information that was passed into this card. Then the next card, we can see read user. And then we can see the compose message. And you can see the arrows also here as well in the flow history. And then we can see message to Slack. If I go here, then we can see that the message was sent. All right. So now let's go back. So this part works. And so next part is let also add the email. We're going to email someone. And also we're going to send this information into a table. But let's do it email first. Now email, again, because it's again, we're going to be using an external service, which is Gmail in my case. So this is going to be an app action. And I'm going to search for Gmail. Now, one thing I didn't say at the beginning, I've been using all these connections. Let me just find. But so before you can use these connections, you do need to create the actual connection to a service, right? You need to sort of authenticate with the service, okay? I didn't do that. I mean, it just takes sometimes a little bit long depending on the service. But of course, that's a requirement for a service. Now, right here, it says Gmail, right? So you need to create a connection to a service. Okay, so again, that will be a requirement if you're using the service for the first time. Same thing with Slack, right? I've got a connection right here to Slack, and same thing with Okta. Okay. Okay. Now for the email, so I'm going to send it to this test email. This is the email. I'm just going to copy it. All right. Now these fields, again, we're going to leave them blank, but if you don't need them, you can also hide them by configuring the card. Now the subject, we can say user activated. Again, maybe just use an emoji. And then we're going to take the same message that we created and just connect it this way. All right. So that's for the email. And while we're building this, let's just add the table as well. Now a table, let me save this and go to table. So notice that I am in this flows tab, and then every folder will also have a tables tab. And I'm going to create a new table. Now a table is a short-term storage that you can just store data that your flow, saves there or maybe reads in the future. So again, it's a temporary storage. I mean, it's not a database, but it's a temporary storage that can be used by various flows as you're building them. In this particular example, you might want to save all the people who are activated into a table, and then you might have another flow that runs on schedule, whether it's every day, every week, or it's up to you. And then, read that information and do something with that, right? So maybe just get a list of all the users who are activated within this week. So that's an option. But let's create a table. We'll call this user activated table. Save. And now there are two columns which are sort of by default in each table, but we're going to create 3 columns. The first one is going to be user ID, and it's the type is text. And then I'm going to click here, add another. So I'm staying on this view. And I can create the next field. Next one is going to be email, and then add another. And then the last one is going to be title. And now finally create. So you can see I've created 3 columns here. Okay. Let's go back to our workflows. Actually, sorry, it's flows here. And user activated. Now, and so now I'm going to, it's part of, it's a function. So I'm going to click add function. And so you can search, of course, but you can also just, it's under tables. So you can see all these functions are separated into sort of folders. And the one I want is tables. And you can see all the operations you can do with tables. So the one we need here is create row. So that's saving a row into a table. When you do that, it's going to ask you to choose a table. And then we just need to find the folder right here. And then, I have 2 tables with the same name. So let me go back. Let me save. This is the one I created. So let's rename this so it's a bit easier. Let's call this Meetup. Right. Go back. And go back here and then find tables, create row, choose table. And all right, here we go. All right, and then save. And now it's going to read the table metadata, and it shows us the 3 inputs, right, which are the columns I created. And so we need those 3 columns. And then now we need to connect data. So for the user ID, I can take it from the event, and I can connect it like this. Now, one little trick I want to show you is you can, of course, drag it from any card. What you can do also is if the ID is available somewhere else, for example, if it's available right here. Now, it's not much closer, but in larger flows, you might be able to use that. Is you can take it from here and then connect it like this. And then the connection, what's really nice is that the connection goes back to the source here. And actually, I did another online meetup. I think it was the last one, or maybe the one before, where we did 10 tips and tricks for workflow. So you can see that tip there. All right, but let's do email and then title. All right, let's save, and let's go to our person. So Alicia is active, so I'm going to deactivate. All right, and I'm going to activate. And let's go to flow history, and we can see there is another run right here. And we can see user activated. We're reading the user, composing a message, sending a message to Slack. It's still showing it's working, but let's see in Slack. So it looks like this was just this just happened. Let's look at email. Let's see if we got email. Let's refresh. So we did get the email. It's right here. All right. Well, while it's loading, let's go here and let's go to flows and let's go look at our table. And this is the Meetup table that I just created, and we can see the information was saved into a table as well. Okay, so Let's go to our flow. Still showing, for some reason, it's still showing, but let me just refresh this. Sometimes it helps. Yeah. All right. So we can see how the information. Anyhow, but this is for the user activated. So of course you can build as sophisticated logic as you need, right? But this is just, of course, an example where we send a message to Slack, we send a message via email, and then we save the information into a table. The table, that you could use that information in a different flow, for example. All right, I know we have just a few minutes, so let's go and quickly create the deactivated flow. All right, let's, as before, a new flow, and we're going to call this user deactivated. And again, we're going to check this option so we can see the flow history. As before, how do we trigger a flow? We're going to click add and then go to Okta. And we can search. Again, this is the information that we get. Let's say we, again, want to just use the read card from Okta connection to get more information about the user. Read user. And then, again, we can just check these properties. And we do want to check username, primary email, and title. Now, as before, we're going to connect the ID from the event. All right. And now, next, we want to make a call to a third-party API. So why would you want to do that? Well, let's say the user is leaving the company, and then you want to perhaps make an API call to a third-party service to cancel their subscription, right? So that would be one example. Now, you will want to make a call, if no connection, if Workflow doesn't have a connection out of the box to that service, so these are all the services that Workflow supports out of the box, then you would need to do a third API call to that service using a card called, if I go to API connector, so again, you can see you can just make a raw HTTP request to that service. So let's do a post here. Now, the service we're going to be using, so there's a nice, neat service called Hookbin, which allows to create an endpoint. So we're just going to make an API call to this endpoint. So this is the API. I'm going to copy it and go here. Now, the body, so let's say this API endpoint accepts a body in JSON format. So let's say I want to send the username, primary email, and title to that service. So I would need to somehow put the body here. So the way we can do that is that we can use a card called construct, and this is object construct, which allows us to create a JSON object, which is really I like to use this card. But let's say we're going to say username. I'm going to map like this. We're going to say email, and then email, and finally title. Right? Now, as before, this is a good idea to test this card. So we're going to click test card. I'm just going to enter some information. Say community. And click test. And what it does is it creates this JSON object, which is pretty neat. All right. All right, let's close. And now we're going to take this output and do it like this. All right. And that's all we want to do. So again, user is deactivated. We're getting more information. We're creating a JSON object and then making a request to third-party API. So let's save this. Let's enable this flow. And okay, so back to our person. And so Alicia is active because we activated in the previous run with the first flow. And then, so now we're going to say deactivate. Okay, so let's go here, flow history. All right, and so this is the run. user deactivated, we're reading the user, and then we're making a request. Now we can go here. This is our third-party API. And we can see, here's the request now. I refresh the page, and this is the body that was sent, right? So again, assuming this is a real service, we're saying, hey, cancel the subscription for this user, for example. All right. But this is just an example that, again, that you can call an API that's not available out of the box in Workflows. So if I go here, we've used Okta, we use Slack, we use Gmail, or we just use the card, or it's available out of the box. But there are situations where you need to call an API that's not available out of the box, and so this is how you would do that. All right, I know we're just a few minutes over time, and that's fine. And then we started, I think, a minute or two later, but we are actually we're done. I wanted to show you how to, again, build. The first flow was user activated, and then Slack, email, and saving to table. And then when the user deactivated, we called an external, a third-party API. All right. So resources, I put a link at the beginning of the chat. So this link is there, but this page has all the resources from tutorials, documentation, tips, how-to guides, office hours, and really everything you need just on one page. So check it out. If you have any questions, that's my email. So please feel free to email me. I have one more slide, is that we have another online meetup coming up in October, and we'll be covering 2 new capabilities: is search flow history, and also how you can let other folks, other admins, run flows. Okay, so if you go to Crowdcast, and you know where it is because you're sort of attending this event, so you can register there. I also would encourage you to follow us on Crowdcast. So if you in the upper right corner, there should be Okta Workflows button, and if you click on it, you'll be able to follow us, and then you'll be notified when we go live. So even if you don't register for an event, you'll get an email that we went live, and then it might be something you want to sort of join. Say, hey, this sounds interesting, so you can join. Other than that, that's it. If you have any questions, let me know. I see there's one comment: get a bigger monitor. No, absolutely, I do need a bigger monitor. So I am using a small monitor on my laptop. So let's see here. There's one question. Would you suggest? Let's see here. Would you suggest using multiple flows for each API call, or one flow for something like removing multiple subscriptions via an API? Yeah, I mean, I think either one could work. I mean, it can be multiple flows. I mean, that way it could be reused, I guess, if you have, an API call per flow. But you could also put multiple flows. I mean, one thing you have to sort of, I guess, keep in mind, if you have multiple API calls in one flow, like what happens if API fails, for example, or so you have to kind of keep that in mind. So you need to add some logic to handle that. So I think either option will work, just depending on what you're building. So. All right, let me know if you have, folks, any other questions. If you have any ideas for future topics, again, also let me know. And as I said at the beginning, the event is recorded. It will be available right after I end this broadcast, and you'll get a message tomorrow. I'll send you a message with links to resources and also a link to YouTube where I'm going to upload this. And again, follow us and then register for the upcoming event in October. All right. Well, I don't see any more questions. So again, my email quickly. I'll go back. My email is right. Oh, I don't want to edit it right here. So any questions, any suggestions, anything, please send them to me. And if there are no other questions, I'm going to end the broadcast. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.